Good afternoon, everybody. You're listening to Steve and Dave's 50 years ago this month. And since this is March 2021, we're going to be talking about March 1971.
Exactly.
In this show, Steve and I take a look at some of the songs that were very meaningful to us back when we were just getting into music appreciation, just starting to realize how great the music on the radio was. And so 50 years ago was a relevant time for us, a very, very important time. But of course, in addition to what was going on the radio, there was all sorts of things going on in the broader culture and politics as well.
That's right.
So we want to give you a little framework for that.
Yeah. So let's do this. Start with this way, Dave. If it's March, kind of mid-March 1971. Everyone in the United States is still abuzz about the fight that took place on March 8th, the so-called fight of the century between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. This fight was, I think, much more than a boxing match. It was a kind of there was a lot of politics involved in it, and it just captured the imagination of people, not only in the United States, but really around the world. And by putting these two in the ring, there was a kind of clash of ideologies, although I think that's a little unfair to Joe Frazier. So Dave, it's right. It's Muhammad Ali is making his way back into boxing, having been stripped of the title in the late 1960s because of his outspoken opposition to Vietnam and his refusal to participate in the draft. And so for 3.5 years, he is in the wilderness. He's not allowed to fight. And he just sort of cast adrift really at the height of his career.
Well, and as contemptible as that action was of stripping him of his title, it's all the more courageous because of the personal consequences that it had for him.
No question.
And he was a very public figure and made a very public statement. And I admire him immensely for that.
No, absolutely. That's absolutely correct. And he was admired then by a fairly wide swath of Americans for his stance. He was certainly a hero in the Black community, but amongst many liberals and students of the day who were in steadfast opposition to the war, Ali became this really incredibly kind of charismatic figure. Now, on the other side of the coin here is Joe Frazier. And Joe Frazier, a son of a sharecropper who grew up in the streets of Philadelphia, a tough guy, a hard-nosed boxer, and actually somebody who became kind of linked then to quite frankly, to sort of almost kind of pro-war kind of politics. This is really not of Frazier's doing, but because Ali was so defiant in his opposition to the war, so defiant, that as the fight approached, many conservative Americans and many conservative political leaders embraced Frazier as sort of as their champion. And so, very odd sort of way, Frazier was really kind of in many ways sort of fighting for those who supported the war. And Ali then poured gasoline on this fire by attacking Frazier, calling him an Uncle Tom, was extremely abusive, frankly, to Frazier in the months leading up to the fight. And again, one of the ironies of all this is that Frazier had an enormous role in getting Ali back into the ring, helping Ali get his fighting license back. At least one point along the way, he actually then gave Ali money to keep him afloat. And in a way, Ali repays him by just lashing him verbally for months. And so as the fight approaches, it becomes this kind of kind of good versus evil, Vietnam versus anti-Vietnam. It's a very strange set of circumstances, but the fight itself captures the country's imagination.
Well, and because the issue itself was so polarizing, you had very, very passionate fans on both sides.
Absolutely. No, that's exactly, I mean, it's one of the things that's hard to sort of wrap your head around 50 years later, but Vietnam had just, so deeply split the United States that this kind of political, that Vietnam actually sort of entered into the arena, into the boxing arena in this case. Now, the fight itself it happened in Madison Square Garden, March 8th, 1971. And it was one of maybe the greatest fight of all time. It went 15 rounds. Ali was noted for his athletic ability, his quickness in the ring. He wasn't known as a big puncher, but he was just sort of lightning fast. And he also had this ability to showboat and even to taunt opponents in the ring. And there was some of that going on in this fight as well. Frazier was relentless. Particularly, he had a left hook that was just vicious. And he caught Ali many times. The fight
actually knocked him down in the 15th round, right?
Knocked him down in the 15th round. The first time Ali had been knocked down in a fight. And Frazier wins the decision, unanimous decision, and Frazier then claims the undisputed heavyweight title. But it's also the case, as observers look back on the fight, that it seemed as though that Ali's star was just on the rise. I mean, even though Ali had been defeated, in a way he had sort of won by being back into the limelight, being back into the ring, and I mean, once again, sort of taking his place at the top of the culture. And Frazier was a diminished figure. He gave everything in the fight, and Frazier would really never reach those heights again in terms of as a boxer. And his career, tumbled pretty quickly after that. It's an odd thing if you think about it, because they fought two other times and Ali won the other two rematches. But Ali Frazier one was considered, one of the great moments, really anyway, kind of one of the great moments in the 20th century. But strangely enough, it's Ali who kind of emerges as this kind of amazing cultural figure, and Frazier is, almost a kind of afterthought. So
the Frazier victory there could have been seen as an omen of what was going to go on in 72, the election.
I wonder. Yeah, maybe so. It's just so odd that this whole kind of silent majority thing and this kind of conservative kind of America push, supporting the troops and all this kind of thing. It was very much in motion, wasn't it, in the early 1970s? If the 60s were really defined by this strident kind of attack on Vietnam and the strident attack on authority, then authority, rose up. And so maybe we should think about what's happening in Vietnam right at this time, Dave. So it's
if that was a precursor of the 72 election, you would have expected McGee to put up a better fight. But okay,
okay.
Neither here nor there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. What's going on in Vietnam?
Well, Vietnam, it's so, Nixon is obviously president. It is Nixon's intent to get the United States out of Vietnam, at least out of, in terms of getting the United States troops out of harm's way in terms of combat. He makes this announcement really as early as 69. And this plan of the so-called Vietnamization of the war is underway. Really, by the time we get to the early 1971, it is South Vietnam. The South Vietnamese troops are really they're the ones that are mostly in combat at this point. Right? You still have 300,000 Americans in Vietnam, but by and large, it's on the front lines. It's South Vietnam. Melvin Laird. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think one of the things about Nixon, as much as he hated the protesters, and he really hated the protesters, he did understand that one of the things that was getting in the way of popular support of the war was the fact that so many young Americans were dying over in Vietnam.
Absolutely.
So he really sped up the return of the troops, and by the early 70s, I don't know, by the time he was done, they had been reduced to like a fourth of the original force.
That's right.
It was incredible.
That's right.
And instead, they intensified the bombing, although I don't know if it's even possible to talk about intensifying.
I don't either.
An already very intensive bombing schedule, and working on the train and the equipment of the South Vietnamese troops.
To that point, Dave, this is the cover of Life magazine in mid-March of 1971, and it's really one of the, Life magazine again was always noted for the amazing photographs. This actually, though, is one of the Life magazine is actually winding down as a publication. It will. It's sort of the beginning of the end for Life magazine, but this is an image of South Vietnamese troops actually as a landmine goes off. It's taking place in Laos. It's really quite a jarring photograph, but it also also illustrates then the whole idea that the fight in Vietnam is now largely a fight between sort of the North and the South, and that the United States has a more kind of advisory role. In addition, though, like you note, to the bombing, which continues really unabated into 1971. It takes the United States a long time to actually extricate itself from Vietnam. It won't fully pull out until, of course, 1975. But these are the months when the war is changing, when the character of the war is changing, and when there are fewer U.S. troops fighting and fewer U.S. troops dying. And Nixon is, I think, able to claim more or less that the process of kind of pulling the United States out of the war is underway. And he will use this then, as we get closer to the election in 72, as a way of sort of, certifying his own ability as a leader to, kind of get things done. He says, I'm going to get the United States out of Vietnam. I'm going to, bring those boys home. And he is starting to kind of actually put this in motion.
Yeah, and you've got at least before the election in 72, the beginning of the Paris peace talks.
Right.
It takes a lot of wind out of an anti-war candidate like McGovern. It looks like the guy who's in charge is already working on getting done and doing what he can. So
I think that's right. No, I think I think you're absolutely right. And David, to that point, then, while the peace talks in Paris go on, it's interminable how long they last. I mean, they spend months talking about, shape of the table and all sorts of nonsense. The fact that they're underway at all, I think you're right. It really, I think, gives credibility to Nixon as a kind of peacemaker, and completely then wounds any kind of peace candidate like McGovern. And so as we'll talk more about this as we get closer to it, but McGovern is just left with few. I mean, he's defenseless. I mean, when he's up against Nixon, and Nixon just hammers him in 72 because he has got so many of these bases already covered.
Which makes it all the stranger that he goes to the lengths that he does to discredit McGovern and to illegal measures, and that that led to Watergate. It was an own goal all the way. For no reason.
No reason. It is completely inexplicable. That
in fact, March 1971 was the first time that CREEP, the committee to elect the president, put together $200,000 for these illegal operations. There was the beginning of Watergate, March 1971.
No, absolutely. There we go. I mean, it's we'll follow the Watergate kind of case as we move into the months of 1971 and into 1972. But again, as you talk about it as a known goal, I mean, that's an apt description. I mean, there was no reason for Watergate to happen, but Nixon being Nixon, he was a flawed human being, and on some level, I guess, couldn't help himself on some level. And so there we go.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's think a little bit about the charts from March 13th, 1971. And at the top of the charts are those crazy kids from Utah the Osmonds. We talked about them a little bit last month, but Dave, you want to talk about one bad apple and what makes One Bad Apple a song worth remembering?
Well, in One Bad Apple, it was originally ascribed. Most of the people that heard it on the radio for the first time thought it was another Jackson 5 hit.
Right.
Very similar sound. In fact, it was written for the Jackson 5 originally, and they passed on it. But absolutely, the Osmonds had been around for a while. They'd been already doing work on the Andy Williams show,
right?
And it was time. They put out their first album, and this was their first hit. It soared.
It soared. And I guess if anything would emerge from the Osmonds, it would be really then the one member, Donny Osmond, who in the sort of the early to mid, even to late 70s, I guess. I mean, really the 70s, very much a kind of Donny Osmond decade. He really was the breakout star from the Osmonds. But the brother act, the Osmonds with One Bad Apple at number one.
Yeah, that's just one of the parallels between the Osmonds and the Jackson 5 is that the charismatic young singer was the one who really drove the group and also harvested most of the.
I think that's fair. I think that's completely fair. Yeah, to some degree, the Osmonds they became a kind of brother group only in name only. That there really was just sort of one breakout star, and that was Donny, and everybody else was singing backup in a weird sort of way. At number two is it's Me and Bobby McGee by Janis Joplin. Janis Joplin, who had died a few months earlier from a drug overdose, but she makes her way to the top of the charts with a song penned by Chris Christopherson. I think we both have some thoughts about this. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about Me and Bobby McGee and maybe a bit about Janis Joplin?
Yeah, well, first of all, you mentioned Chris Christopherson. This is, for me, a very typical Christopherson song. He talks about watching Fellini's Estrada, the street, and like the final scene is Anthony Quinn lying on the beach, just at the end of his rope, lying on the beach, looking up at the stars. And he said that's the place that this singer was at. Just got nothing left to lose, and that's all she left me, So that's freedom. That, I guess she left me free, But so that's a very typical Christopherson moment as far as I'm concerned.
It really is. He is one of the most literate songwriters to come from this era. He studied in England, has a degree in literature. I believe he was a Rhodes Scholar. Christopherson is an amazing figure, actually. I mean, I think they're actor, writer, songwriter.
Great actor. Yeah.
Yeah. He's really an amazing figure. And we're actually going to talk about him again in a bit on the charts, but this is very much Chris Christopherson becoming kind of powerhouse in American music. And the Joplin hit is, there's a lot of sadness that surrounds it. And there's a lot of sadness that surrounds Janis Joplin as a figure. Growing up in Texas, Port Arthur, Texas, she was, I think certainly by her own admission, and then by those who knew her, a kind of outsider, someone who never really kind of fit in, never really belonged, very much was
looking for love.
She was, I think, a very lonely figure. And I think when she traveled to California to strike gold with in the recording industry. It really was, I wouldn't say it's a kind of a desperate move, but she really was a kind of lost soul. When she then hooked up with musicians who became, who she'd been played with, she found a kind of family. I think when you read accounts of Joplin, she is just this kind of woman looking for love, looking for affection, looking to fit in. Just it's actually painful. In interviews, you see interviews with her, she's clearly a kind of figure at loose end, a lost woman. It's uncomfortable sometimes.
Well, and she was she came to California at the height of flower power, at
Exactly. Yeah.
that sort of thing. And so she kind of came into a community that was extremely accepting, and I think really had these vibes of peace and understanding, and
Yes.
everything's groovy, and we love you, man. And so I think that really, really spoke to her, and she felt at home.
I think that's absolutely right. I think that's absolutely right. And I do think then that, it's interesting. She died a young woman. I believe she died at maybe 20.
She's one of the 27 Club.
I believe that's right. Yeah. There's an interview with Joplin and Dick Cavett right around this era where she talks about getting ready to go home for her 10-year high school anniversary. And she talks about how she's so excited about going back to Port Arthur to show everybody that she went to school with that she became someone. She's really looking to kind of, just kind of show them, look, you dismiss me, but look, I really am. I found it a kind of, again, I found it kind of painful to listen to how unsure she was of herself. She was clearly a woman who was just, there was this void that she was looking to fill.
Yeah, I think that's right. I actually had the painful experience of watching The Rose with Bette Midler. And anybody who likes the movie, that's fine. It was not, but supposedly it was loosely based on.
That's right.
Life, right.
That's right.
And you had a lot of that being thematized in this movie. One of the sad things about it was this song, Me and Bobby McGee, which for me is one of the two signature songs of
oh right. Joplin. Oh right.
Number 148 on Rolling Stone's Greatest 500 Songs of All Time. And it's just fantastic. It's just wonderful. And it became her first number one hit, but it was released posthumously.
Yep.
It was a song on her Pearl album, the last album that she recorded. And Chris Christopherson was not even aware that she had recorded it until he heard it the day after she died.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just it's so sad. Clearly a very, very talented person who died too young.
Absolutely.
And this was maybe the absolute high watermark of her.
I think that's fair. I think that's actually a good way to think of it. So at number 2 we have Me and Bobby McGee. At number 3 then the Carpenters, and my favorite Carpenters song, and that is For All We Know. They've got a couple.
Oh really? Oh, okay.
Oh, it is by far my favorite. Yeah.
I like it. It's probably not close to the top of the list for me, but
okay. Well, yeah.
This was written for the movie, the 1970s movie, Lovers and Other Strangers. And there's some fairly obvious lines. Look at the two of us, strangers in many ways. So some obvious references there. The music was written by Fred Carlin, and the lyrics were written by Rob Royer and Jimmy Griffin. Do those names ring any bells?
Vaguely, but I'm not able to place it. But yes, they are familiar. But what? Yeah,
they're original members of Bread.
That's it. Yes, right.
So it topped out at number 3. So this week was their top, but it was number 1 in the Billboard's Easy Listening chart, where it stayed for 3 weeks. It won an Academy Award for the Best Original Song in 1971, but they were not allowed to perform it at the Oscars because they had not appeared in any films, which was apparently a rule that I think since then I've seen singers that have not been in films. But at that point, apparently it was a thing. So they asked Petula Clark to sing it.
Oh,
She did. Downtown
oh,
is
sure.
what she's most famous for,
Oh,
of course.
absolutely.
But she then sang it live as a kind of dedication to Karen Carpenter 2 days after Karen Carpenter died.
Wow.
And that's kind of a touching moment as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But interestingly, the Richard had seen this in the movie, thought, oh, that's something that would be good for us. And Jose Feliciano,
Oh,
he would like to play on it for them.
wow.
So he played the intro, which apparently had originally been a French horn,
Yeah. Right.
I think in the movie version. But he played that on his guitar, and
Yeah. Super cool.
then his record company said, please remove it. We don't want him playing on your record.
Yeah.
So instead, as happens so often, they got the Wrecking Crew in there. And Earl Dumler played the oboe
It's
intro. Na, 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 na,
and that's
na, na.
and how many oboes do you hear in popular music? Not very many. I mean, and the oboe was very prominent in this song, which is one of the
It's fantastic. It's a fantastic intro. Yeah. And Joe Osborne, who kind of discovered the Carpenters.
yes.
He brought them to the attention of Herb Alpert, A&M Records, and kind of had a protecting arm around them
Yeah.
career. Hal Blaine, of course, on drums. So that's for all we know.
But yeah, so then we have the Carpenters at number 3. At number 4, then we have the Temptations with Just Imagination Running Away with Me. The Temptations were, I think, in the minds of many people who are sort of Motown aficionados, they are sort of, a kind of classic, if not maybe the classic Motown group. They were a group coming out of Detroit with the classic five again of the Temptations: David Ruffin, Melvin Franklin, Paul Williams, Otis Williams, and again Eddie Kendricks. Ruffin leaves the group in the late 1960s, but the Temptations roll on with many hits. I mean, they're extraordinarily successful on the R&B charts, and they also then, they also are powerhouses on the pop charts. This song, for example, Just My Imagination, again, peaks at number 1. It's again a kind of a dreamy song, hopes and desires. There's almost a kind of wistfulness to it that is, it's a wonderful song. But the group itself is coming apart at the seams. There's a lot of tension in the group, particularly between, again, Eddie Kendricks and Otis Wilson. And Kendricks will leave the group shortly after the song charts. And I think from that point on, really, the Temptations are very much a kind of lesser group. They continue on through the 70s. Kendricks and Ruffin will have some success as solo artists. But this, in a way, is the kind of high watermark, for the Temptations, at least on the pop charts. And Rolling Stone considers it one of the great songs of all time. And on the top 500 songs, it comes in at 389. And so Just My Imagination by the Temptations.
I love the Rolling Stones version of that on Some Girls album. Also very nice. Gets that wistfulness across very nicely.
Yeah.
And to say the Temptations was one of the powerhouse groups of Motown is really saying something, because it was a Motown was a record company that produced just giants.
It's agreed. It's just unbelievable the number of people who recorded for Motown. I mean, it's just the who's who. I mean, but the Temptations are right at the top of that list, and they had they certainly had almost a kind of international following. Very much a group that's associated with a kind of psychedelic soul. Even they were considered a very hip group. That it's in a day where, they had a wide following, both on the R&B charts and in the pop charts, and they really captured the imagination of lots of people. Not only their singing, but their stage presence, really a very very happening group.
They did Wild Confusion, right? That was one of their
Absolutely.
their psychedelic. Love that song.
Yeah.
And that was actually that whole psychedelic thing came about after Smokey Robinson had replaced as their main producer. And I don't have the name of the guy who took over and took the Temptations psychedelic. Don't have it off the top of my head, but there was a switch there, a very conscious decision.
Absolutely.
Direction, and it was a very successful move for that group as well.
Yeah, I think it broadened their appeal dramatically, and
I think Psychedelic Shack was the first album that they made in that.
Yeah, that's right. And there was, there's this moment in the late '60s and early 1970s where groups from Motown, they're casting their net even wider, right? That they're getting listeners from all over, and it's and there is something about them that's very prescient. They're very much in touch with what's happening in the culture. I think Motown.
Well, I think we're going to talk about Marvin Gaye probably next month.
Next month, and
that's certainly an example of what you're talking about.
Classic example there. Yeah, absolutely. So we have the Temptations at number 4 with Just My Imagination. At number 5 is the Welsh powerhouse Tom Jones with She's a Lady, which eventually peaks at number 2. I guess maybe She's a Lady is one of the most important things about She's a Lady is who it's written by. It's written by Paul Anka, and Paul Anka is Paul Anka is amazing. Paul Anka was a teen idol with many hits of his own. Many hits. Paul Anka had a number 1 hit in 1959 with Lonely Boy. Paul Anka then, 15 years later, has a number 1 hit with You're Having My Baby, very different kind of song. And in between, he has, 34 top 40 hits. Paul Anka is just incredible. Paul Anka wrote the Tonight Show theme. He wrote My Way, Put Your Head on My Shoulder. It's just like on and on it goes, right? And so She's a Lady is part of the, comes from the pen of Paul Anka. But it clearly becomes the kind of signature song for for Tom Jones in a way. Tom Jones has a kind of misogynist streak to him. There is this, he's a, alpha male.
Macho, yeah.
Macho.
That's part of his appeal. Yeah.
You can smell the testosterone when he's on this. But an incredibly powerful singer, very dynamic stage presence. I'm not trying to take away from his talent, but to contextualize it, he very much was a kind of macho man, and that was his big appeal. And so She's a Lady, kind of becomes very much part of the Tom Jones canon. We've talked a little bit about Jones in the past. He had a TV show for a few years in the late 60s and early 1970s. This is Tom Jones, where he paired himself with a number of performers up from the era. I think most,
including like Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Exactly.
And the fact that he could sing with them and it wasn't embarrassing, and it wasn't. Watching that was amazing. It really says something about his ability.
I'd agree with you completely. Yes. And that show was interesting because of the guests and that fact that Jones would really work to fit his performing style into their. He worked to be a good host, and they worked as as a duet. Very interesting stuff. Jones later, of course, much later, became familiar to an entirely new generation. He was on The Voice and the UK Voice. He really never has stopped working for maybe 30 years. He was a staple in Las Vegas, Tom Jones became he was kind of a force of nature on stage. And so we have at number 5 we have She's a Lady. Let's see. At number 6, then we have the Jackson 5 with Mama's Pearl. we've talked a lot about the Jackson Five in the 1970 into 1971. But this will really be, I mean, for the Jackson Five, they are now, I mean, they're kind of in decline. Clearly, the breakout figure from the Jackson Five will be Michael Jackson, in the way that Donny Osmond was the breakout figure from the Osmonds. But as a group, the Jackson Five will never be any more powerful than they were in the early 1970s. And Mama's Pearl is maybe the last of their big early 70s hits.
And very forgettable. In fact, I did forget it. I could not.
I have to, yeah.
All the other songs that we've talked about immediately said something to me. Mama's Pearl, like what was that?
Yeah, I have to agree. So at number 7 is a song written by John Fogerty of Creedence Clearwater Revival. And it is covered by Ike and Tina Turner and Proud Mary. Well, Ike and Tina Turner make Proud Mary their own in a very powerful way. So Dave, you want to talk a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Proud Mary had been a big hit for CCR back in '69. Was the first of 5 number 2 hits for CCR.
That's right.
We've talked about this before. Amazingly, never had a number 1 hit. But this was the first number 2 hit, or the only number 2 hit that was actually blocked out by 2 different songs. First, it was Everyday People by Sly and the Family Stone, and they couldn't break into that. And then when that left the number 1 slot, Dizzy by Tommy Rowe.
Oh God,
hopped over.
Of course it did. Dizzy. Lord have mercy.
It's a good song.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so there's that. John Fogerty said he wrote this like 2 days after being discharged from the National Guard, and maybe that's the left a good job in the city reference. Rolling on the River was from a movie by Will Rogers.
Oh, interesting.
So we had some of that stuff going on. This was the Ike and Tina Turner's second single from their Working Together album. It was released in January '71. And it was rearranged by Ike Turner and Soko Richardson. And it's a very, very different. I didn't find the CCR version particularly interesting. It had already been covered by some other groups, more promising. So he took it and rearranged it, and they came up with something entirely different. We're going to start off nice and easy, but anyone who knows us knows that we don't do anything nice and easy. That whole intro by Tina Turner is a classic, and it's part of the appeal of the song. And they start slow and kind of a soul or almost a gospel type of approach to the song, and then it rocks out, and the Ikettes come in, and they turn up the beat, and it soars. And this, of course, has been a staple of both the Ike and Tina Turner concert tours and Tina Turner as a solo artist, who had all sorts of hits to sing on tour, but this was always one of her signature songs. They absolutely did make it there. They received an Grammy Award in 1972 as the best R&B vocal performance by a group for this song. And they played on television, Playboy After Dark, Ed Sullivan shortly before that was no longer possible, and Soul Train, of course.
Of course, yeah.
So,
Cornelius and Soul Train. Yeah, that's propulsive. I mean, it's clear that Ike and Tina Turner, that Ike Turner knew what he was doing. Obviously, though, as we learn a little later, right, that Ike Turner was a very difficult human being and was extraordinarily abusive. And Tina Turner was, I think, almost a kind of hostage in that relationship. And in her autobiography, I, Tina, she details this quite graphically. It's
which we see with a kind of disturbing regularity in the music industry.
Yes, no kidding. That's no joke. But it's, but this Tina Turner's amazing in this song. She's amazing in this song, and she's an amazing performer. And the fact that she had a kind of rebirth in the 80s, as a solo performer, it speaks to her talent. But it is interesting how different the two versions of Proud Mary. I mean, they hardly seem like the same song.
No, it really doesn't. And I like both versions.
Yeah, me too.
But they are very different. Turner, an amazing woman, a strong woman. And once she made her comeback, she continued to work and pretty much make her own terms until she just didn't want it anymore.
Right.
So.
Yeah, to her credit, she knew what she wanted and she lived the way she wanted to live. And then, like you say, when she was done performing, she was done performing. I think she lives in Switzerland now, I believe.
I think she still makes music, but it's like Zen or Buddhistish type of stuff.
I think that's right. She's a very interesting woman, and her life is there's been books and there've been movies, about it, and she's incredible. And I think Ike Turner, I don't think history remembers Ike Turner too fondly. Even let's look at this again if we could. Even the 45 sleeve, there is something about Ike Turner. He always had the image of his, the tough guy.
Yeah, he looks kind of sinister.
Yeah, sinister, menacing, and you can't find a picture. Virtually can't find a picture of Ike Turner where he doesn't,
where that's not the case. Yeah.
And so he didn't do himself any favors by this.
But Ike Turner, he was already a veteran of the music scene.
Yes.
He met Tina.
Yes.
He was bringing artists to Phil. Who am I thinking of?
I don't know.
Sun Studios, Memphis.
Oh, Sam Phillips.
Sam Phillips.
Yeah.
So back in the late 50s,
Ike Turner had been around a while, and by the time we get to 1971, he was a veteran of the so-called Chitlin circuit. He was he was an impresario in his own way. It's hard. You can't ignore what Ike Turner did in that relationship, and it's horrendous. But he did have an incredible amount of talent. He's obviously a very complicated and flawed individual. And just the arrangement here of Proud Mary, which Ike Turner is largely responsible for, is just like, man, this is amazing. It's just an amazing kind of approach to this Fogerty song. It's just really something.
Yeah.
So that's number 7. That's Proud Mary. At number 8. At number 8 is the aforementioned John Fogerty and CCR with "Have You Ever Seen the Rain" and "Hey Tonight." What can we say about CCR? They are for this era, late 60s, early 1970s. They are one of the most dominant faces on the pop scene. Again, as you've noted, they are always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Peaking, the songs peak at number 2, that kind of thing. But they very much had their kind of finger on the pulse of America. And I think to that degree, Fogerty was really a very interesting, a very important songwriter. It's "Have You Ever Seen the Rain," for example, is a song that many people, and Fogerty himself talks about it in the context of Vietnam. The rain maybe being warfare, maybe being bombs, the idea, there's a certain kind of melancholy, almost a kind of darkness to the song. And Fogerty wrote several songs that had allusions to Vietnam, to combat, to what was happening,
or at least were understood in that way.
That's right.
CCR was an incredibly popular group among the troops in Vietnam, and
Yes, they were.
they really identified with that music. And there are certainly things that songs like "Run Through the Jungle," "Have You Ever Seen the Rain," things like this that certainly are inducive to images of jungle war. But in this case, John Fogerty said he was actually thinking about just the incredible tension that was going on in the band. And stood shortly before its dissolution.
Yeah.
Brother Tom, who was the drummer, was leaving essentially, and this idea. Have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day? It was a sunny day for CCR. Man, they were at the top of their game.
Well, it should have been the best of times, right?
They were absolutely. They were a beloved group, very popular, making money. Fame, everything you want, and none of them were happy. They were depressed. They were tense. So that's kind of what this song's about. Have you ever seen the rain down on us?
It's this group, and then so it's a double-sided hit. It's "Hey Tonight," which is a far
Hey
less.
Tonight is also on their best hits album,
Right?
The Chronicles. Also, song. So what a single, right?
It's a great single, but you are, and this is again, Tom Fogerty leaves the band basically after this is released. This particular song comes from the Pendulum LP, an LP that they recorded at the Wally Heider Studios in San Francisco, where they recorded most of their material. They were a month in the studio, a full month, and that was super long for CCR. Generally, they were almost like a one-take band, but it was, it really was sort of the beginning of the end. You're absolutely right, Dave, that it is such a dyspeptic group that they just seem to be so unhappy all the time about everything that, it's amazing that they did what they did, because it does seem as though everybody in the band was freaking miserable the entire time they were performing. And the fact that they were able to pull off this string of hits, which is a substantial string of hits, I mean, by any measure. In fact, and that they hated each other.
Well, and the thing is, the music that they were making was so energy, so full of life.
Yes.
Joyful. It was joyful music. It's just
a lot of it just simply buoyant. Yeah.
You can't listen to it without being in a good mood. And it's so strange that it's being made by these guys that just really don't even enjoy being together and make together.
Yeah, they don't seem to enjoy it. There's just no joy in it whatsoever. There is something I think about any group that has the brothers in it. I mean, there's famous, down the line, if you've got brothers in the group, you might have you might have trouble. And certainly CCR was no exception to that. But even after Tom Fogerty left, John Fogerty was freaking miserable. Part of it again was, they were at constant war with the record label, Fantasy Records, and of course they spent years in court with their label. But here you go. It's just it's so interesting what you hear and what's sort of behind what's happening in the studio and whatnot. It can be so very different. It's just sometimes it's just jarring. And CCR is a classic example of that.
And it might be interesting to note that CCR was the quintessential AM radio band.
Yes, they were.
I think most of their hits were under 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So perfect for that format. And now coming into the 70s, we're entering a new age radio. We're entering an age of FM radio. And maybe it's no accident that it's just the wrong time now. They're no longer the group for the time as they were.
I think that's an interesting.
Incredibly for the last years of the 60s.
No, I think that's an interesting point.
This was their 8th gold-selling single.
Unbelievable.
And it hit number 1 in Canada, but this one peaked at number 8.
And again, it's just So there we have it. At the double A-sided Hey Tonight and Have You Ever Seen the Rain? Well, at number nine, of course, it's the Partridge Family. Neither partridges nor family, right? And it's Doesn't Somebody Want to Be Wanted? Yet another.
Yeah, this is from their 1971 album, Up to Date.
Yeah.
Was written by their producer, Wes Farrell.
Yeah.
Apple and Jim Kritikos. And Wes Farrell was responsible for a lot of their
He was.
For a lot of their songs, wrote a lot of their songs, and produced them all. David Cassidy hated this song. He, in fact, he refused to sing it, or he refused to sing it the way they wanted him to. There's a vocal interlude where he's merely a spoken word. And he didn't want to do it. He refused to do it. So they even had to get like executives from Bell Records and Screen Gems, both companies owned by Columbia Pictures.
Yeah.
They had to get involved. And so his manager and I think Farrell came to him and said, look, man, it will be a bigger hit. We're going to sell more records if you just do it this way. Anyway, they browbeat him so long that he just said, all right, I'll do it. He caved, but he says, man, it was horrible. I was embarrassed by it. I still can't listen to that record.
Yeah. Song blows.
I love that song.
The song blows.
It's one of their better songs.
No, it's not.
It's in the top 5 Partridge Family songs. Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Oh my Lord!
Back in the day, I remember back in the day.
God. Yeah, go ahead.
I was really taken by this song as a 10-year-old. Yeah,
I stand with David Cassidy on this one. No, really, it's.
Well, I'm with Wes Farrell, so
there you go. Well, you are always corporate stuff.
And it was, Partridge Family. The show was pretty much a domestic,
yes.
but the music was international, and this hit number 1 in Canada, number 6 in France, where it peaked for them in America too, was at number 6, number 9 in Australia. They loved it everywhere, Steve. Everywhere, everybody loved it.
Okay.
So you're pretty alone in this. You and David Cassidy can go sit in your corner and song. This is a great song.
It's well, okay. I don't like it at all, actually. But I was thinking about this the other day. Somebody made a boatload of money off the Partridge Family. When you think about all of the music that they sold in this era, they were just records. The television show itself, all the merchandising, the notebooks and the lunch boxes and all of this nonsense that was flooding the market for, during these years. Somebody made tons of cash. I don't think it certainly wasn't the people within the show. I don't know that Shirley Jones and David Cassidy and Susan Day and the like, really raked it in by any
stretch. Not like the Monkees did, for example. No. The Monkees really were earning well during their heyday. In fact, there's that famous story of when their producer came and met them in some hotel bungalow and passed out their first $1 million checks.
Right.
And Mike Nesmith got in an argument and put a hole in the wall. Just imagine being that upset about getting $1 million check.
Well, it's not like Mike Nesmith had never seen money before.
No, that's true.
But you're right.
Mike Nesmith was also not known for being a laid-back type of guy. I think.
He wasn't. Unlike he would seem like on the show maybe the least likely of the Monkees to punch a wall or something like that. But in real life, he was a powder keg. But back to the Partridge Family, I guess. So Cassidy made his money in this era through touring. So quite famously, right, he would tour on the weekends, and he would tour frankly all over the world and come back exhausted then to the set on Mondays for the read through and all this kind of thing. He really sort of wore himself out, and I think it was very detrimental to him. I mean,
well, they actually had to stop. They actually had to stop filming for this crisis, for the David Cassidy strike. They stopped filming to get this taken care of. So incredible. One of the rare. And I think there's any number of songs that he has more reason to be embarrassed by, but let me just mention Wes Farrell for a second.
Yeah, go ahead though. Yeah,
he's also something of a powerhouse songwriter and producer. He worked on Indian Lake. I believe wrote and produced Indian Lake for the Cowsills, who were kind of the prototype group for the Partridge Family. And he also wrote Hang On Sloopy. You know that?
Okay. Yeah, I did know that. And that was Rick Derringer, the McCoys do Hang On Sloopy.
McCoys, right.
And Rick Derringer then is in the McCoys, he does Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo later on. So he wrote that. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
And I guess that's one of the most performed songs of all time.
Oh, I think it is. Yes, I think that's right. Absolutely.
Which surprises me, but I mean,
garage band kind of thing, but yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Wes Farrell.
Wes Farrell, it's easy enough to make fun of the Partridge Family. And again, you see we just showed the 45 sleeve, which is the same damn picture. And they released 3 singles with the same goddamn picture. But there is something about that. There is a certain, I don't know what exactly the word is, but there's something about that song and their music that was memorable, that struck a chord with young people. Clearly it helped that David Cassidy was, looked like an Adonis, but there was something about that music that was that really spoke to young people in this.
Yeah, and that Susan Day looked like Venus. That is.
Oh, well, there, absolutely, yeah, no question. And Shirley Jones was an attractive.
Was a MILF.
Yeah. So yes, there we go. I think that's the first time we've broached that. Here we go, breaking new ground today. But I don't think any of it holds up. I mean, I think
I was a huge fan.
That's what I was too. Yeah.
And I bought their greatest hits compilation a few years back for purposes, and I listened to it, and it just, unlike the Monkees, for instance, it just doesn't hold up particularly well. There are a couple songs that I still really like, but you can't listen to an album. It's too much mediocrity and.
Well, I mean, to be okay, absolutely, I agree. It doesn't hold up much at all. No one loves the Monkees like you do. You love the Monkees more than the Monkees themselves do. But yeah, I think there's a
lot of self-loathing in the Monkees. It's unfortunate.
That's a very heavy. It's a heavy group, man. A lot of big thinkers. Okay, so we got the Partridge Family once again at number 9.
Well, this is an easy segue, right?
Go ahead, please do. Go away.
So from the Monkees, sorry, not the Monkees, from Partridge Family, we're going to skip to, or are we going to skip? Where are we at here?
Well, just real quickly then, number 10 then, in mid-March 1971 is Gordon Lightfoot's The Canadian Troubadour. If I Could Read Your Mind, which we talked a little bit about last week.
Right.
I want to just make a brief mention about number 15. It's Sammi Smith's Help Me Make It Through the Night, which is another Chris Christopherson song. And Sammi Smith, this is just real quickly, Sammi Smith is one of a number of country artists who are coming to the pop charts in this era that are making a dent. This is part of the so-called countrypolitan movement, where there's a kind of more sophisticated country music, less twangy and less yokel. This is her high watermark on the pop charts. She did, though, chart a lot on the country charts for years and years and years. But this again is one of many Chris Christopherson songs that are charting in this era. And this becomes a kind of classic for Christopherson. This ends up being covered by, in my notes,
This is covered a lot. Yeah.
covered by everyone. But in many ways, Sammy Smith's version is one of the most memorable. And the Smith version, yeah, it peaks at number 8 on the pop charts, but it is, of course, a number 1 smash on the country charts. But 15 make it through the night. I'm going to cherry pick it here a little bit more. At number 16, then, Dave, I think you probably have a couple words to say about yet another
All right.
teen idol, and that's Bobby Sherman. Cried Like a Baby at number 16.
This was the song I wanted to segue to.
Yeah, there we go.
Because between the Partridge Family, David Cassidy, we're talking David Cassidy, it's just a short skip and jump to Bobby Sherman. Those were the two major teen idols in the early years of the 1970s.
I think it's absolutely the case, yeah.
Bobby Sherman had a handful of hits as well, including Cried Like a Baby. We've already talked about Julie, Do You Love Me, which was, I think, his first big hit, his first top 10 hit.
Right.
Cried Like a Baby never made it to top 10 in the Hot 100. It did make it to number 9 on the Easy Listening chart. This was written by, any guesses?
Well, give me a hint.
Well, he's one of the giants. He's a small
Paul Williams.
Paul Williams.
Oh, that's a very good clue. Paul Williams.
Yeah, Paul Williams and Craig Durja or something like that. I never heard of him before.
Writing partner. Yeah, longtime writing partner. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, good.
Did not
know that.
I loved this song back in the day. Listen to it again. Again, this is a song that does not hold up well for me.
Yeah, right.
But it does hold up. I reading the comments on YouTube below this video. Man, there are still huge Bobby Sherman fans, and not just a few, who really, really love this song, or just still admire him greatly. And as a person, Bobby Sherman really is a fairly admirable guy.
Yeah, very interesting career trajectory. Yeah.
Yeah, after he got out of pop music, he went into like law enforcement.
Yes.
Kind of an auxiliary type thing, and made that, and was he?
I think he was
emergency.
Yeah, he was an EMT, emergency medical technician for a while. Yeah.
EMT, right, for a while, and so, and doing training in that area and things like that.
Right.
So, very solid
yeah.
guy, and still incredibly loved by his fans. Still has a very loyal fan base.
So
after all these years,
I have a surprise for you, Dave. And so, if it's March 1971 and you are a young person, you might subscribe to this magazine. And so I'd like you to comment on the March 1971.
Oh my God.
Tiger Beat.
I had that magazine.
All right, so go ahead and talk. So what? Oh, well, wow, you openly admit it. So what is Tiger Beat? What is this? What is
All right. I'm going to spin it this way.
Okay, here we go.
Was the Rolling Stone for the under 13 generation.
Okay, yeah, I can see that kind of. Go ahead. What does that mean? Go ahead.
Well, what it really means is that it's a girly fanzine, and most of the people who were reading Tiger Beat were young girls, prepubescent young girls.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it's fair. I think that's who it was skewed to. But I mean,
and me, and
you. But
these two guys were among my biggest idols.
Sure.
Just when they're both on the cover like this, it probably refers to the fact that Bobby Sherman appeared on the Partridge Family show. There was a cameo, which was like a meeting of the Titans.
Got a surprise for you, Dave. Yeah.
For people like me.
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. He did appear on the Partridge Family show. Yeah, this must have been. So is there a story that is associated with this, Dave? So because the episode where Bobby Sherman appears on the Partridge Family first airs in March March of 1971. So roughly the time period we're talking about, almost exactly.
Yeah. And
You're a big Partridge Family fan, and so
I was a big Partridge Family fan. I was a big Bobby Sherman fan, and then he was going to have a cameo. So I was psyched for this, and our television went on the blink on that day. Could not get reception, could not get a clear picture. Nothing but static, and I had a meltdown. I had an absolute meltdown. I don't recall ever having that sort of, just losing it in that way, like I did that night. But yeah, probably my family still remembers that. I certainly do.
that was a blow for a young man. And,
yes.
You know, it's interesting. We are, in terms of full disclosure, we're not the exact same age. You're just a little bit older than I am, but you're just enough older that I don't really remember the Bobby Sherman phase as a young person. That Bobby Sherman I didn't mean anything to me. Cassidy, Donny Osmond, all that, Michael Jackson, yeah. But Bobby Sherman sort of had his star was already, you know, falling by the time you know, I became sort of aware of what was going on in the very, very early 70s, 72, something like that. But yeah, Bobby Sherman was, I mean, he was a teen idol and a big deal, an enormous deal in this era, right? And so you would have Bobby Sherman, Donny Osmond, David Cassidy, Michael Jackson, I guess, right? Those would probably be the big four of that era in terms of sort of.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Something like
You had Leif Garrett and those guys, Sean Cassidy,
a little later.
David's brother, just
Yeah.
years later, 2-3 years later. But they were not there yet. So
Just one other thing. I want to look at this Tiger Beat for just a second, once more. And it's, sort of, having some fun with this. This again is an era where there were 3 networks, that there was obviously no internet. So people were starved for information about music artists. This would have been the era where rock magazines like Cream and Crawdaddy and of course Rolling Stone were very, very important, very, very powerful. And for a younger set, a magazine like Tiger Beat was really important. And again, you're just hungry for information. You're hungry for pictures. You're just anything you can get, any kind of nugget. And so it's easy enough to sort of make fun of these. And I think you're right. They did kind of skew toward maybe prepubescent young girls. But there was something about these magazines that were important. I mean, it made a difference if you were in the magazine. This magazine not only sold magazines, it sold records. And it was on the screen for television. It was a big deal. And in an era where there just wasn't that much access to information, where you poured over record albums, right, to see who was playing what instrument and who was the producer, and just any kind of morsel of information about your favorite performer. Something like Tiger Beat was a kind of godsend because it actually.
Well, Tiger Beat was essentially just advertising for the record industry, right?
I think it was, yeah, planted the stories, and yeah, absolutely. But an important source of advertising, important source.
I remember the Tiger Beat story about the cameo appearance, and it started off with Bobby Sherman sitting in the little folding studio chair of David Cassidy. And David Cassidy comes up and says, "Hey man, that's my chair." Oh, sorry, man. And David Cassidy.
He was cool with it.
But I was sweating bullets for a couple seconds there,
I know.
Oh no, David Cassidy's an asshole. I don't need to know this. But no, everything was okay.
Well, those crazy kids, they finally got along. But and again, those episodes where there would be kind of that cross-pollination, that was a big deal. That was a big deal. So I feel your pains. 50 years removed, I still feel your pain.
I think I saw something on there about Jack Wilde. Do you remember Jack Wilde?
No, I don't. And so Jack Wilde, I know.
I think Jack Wilde was the guy that played Oliver in the movie. And no, he didn't play Oliver. I think he played
the
Artful Dodger.
Artful Dodger? Jack Wilde.
But anyway, he was also the H.R. Pufnstuf kid.
Oh yeah. I think yeah.
I think.
We'll need to double check that, but yes, that's right. There, yes.
I think that's right.
Who had his own kind of dark journey. Man, I don't think.
And I see something here about Chris Stein needs your help. Chris Stein, wasn't he one of the Talking Heads?
I think he was.
Might have spelled it differently. I don't know.
Might have spelled it differently. Oh well. Oh my God. Well, with that, we can
leave Tiger Beat for a while.
Leave Tiger Beat. At cherry pick a couple more then, if we could. At number 17 is a soul legend, Wilson Pickett with "Don't Let the Green Grass Fool You," and Wilson Pickett's influence on music, particularly vocal styles, shouldn't be underestimated. He was a kind of singer. He was really considered an amazing force, really one of the great singers, maybe of the 20th century. Certainly in the soul circuit, he was really well thought of. He grew up. He was born in Alabama, but was raised in Detroit. I mean, part of this kind of great migration out of the South. He was discovered by Atlantic Records by Jerry Wexler, who of course was a great album guy, great record guy, maybe a record guy, Jerry Wexler.
Yeah, well, we should talk about him at some point behind the curtain. He's a very important figure.
Yeah, Wexler's an amazing figure, and Atlantic was an incredibly powerful label for soul artists. Everybody was on Atlantic. I mean, if you're looking for soul artists, I suppose in this era, you were looking either at Motown or Atlantic. It was just really incredible.
Or Stax.
Stax, yeah, that's right. No, you're right. You're good point. For Atlantic, though, Wilson Pickett, he charts. Well, he hits number one. He hits number one on the R&B chart several times with "In the Midnight Hour," 634, 578, Soulsville, USA, "Land of a Thousand Dances," "Funky Broadway." "Don't Knock My Love Part 1. I mean, he's a huge figure. Never has quite as much success on the pop charts, but Wilson Pickett enters the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1991 based upon his vocal stylings. Wilson Pickett's life took a series of kind of ugly turns, but he's really at the peak of his fame and his power right now with "Don't Let the Green Grass Fool You." Just really an incredible vocalist. So he's at number 17. And we don't want to overlook right now at number 20, there's this group. I guess they're a group. The Grassroots, and really kind of rockin' song, something called "Temptation Eyes" at number 20.
Yeah. One of the Grassroots put out a number of very enjoyable pop things. This is a little more rocky than a lot of the stuff that they do.
Yeah.
This the Grassroots actually started off as kind of a studio invention. We talked a little bit about this when we talked about the Wrecking Crew.
That's right. Yeah.
That they would come up with stuff and produce it, and then need a group to front the music that was being produced.
That's right.
In this case, the Grassroots was a creation of the songwriters P.F. Sloan, who we may also have to talk about at some point.
Yes.
And Steve Barry, with Lou Adler as the producer.
Lou Adler, he's everywhere.
So in the beginning, it was mostly Wrecking Crew, and they went through several incarnations. The group went through several incarnations before kind of solidifying as the group that then went on to make all the hit records. In this particular incarnation, the group was made up of Rob Grill, who sang lead on this song, although 3 of the 4 members were lead vocalists. They were a very talented group vocally. Rob Grill also played bass on this. Etner was rhythm guitar. They're also a lead vocalist, just not on this song. Rick Kuntz was drummer, percussionist, and Dennis Provisor was. So that was the group makeup for this song. The Temptations, this is at number 20 on March 13th, but it peaked at number 15.
Yeah.
But this group had 2 gold albums. It was on the Billboard Hot 100 21 times. 3 times in the top 10, 3 times in the top 20, and then 14 times in the top 40.
Yeah.
They were very successful and
Sold a lot of records
from that period that we recognize and hear on the radio.
right.
Were from the grassroots. So
yeah, and so just the song, it features horns, guitar, a little bit of synth. It's actually quite a catchy number.
yeah, Rob Grill said it's his favorite grassroots song.
It's worth remembering, but you're right. The Grassroots was a peculiar group in that they were, at least in their initial incarnation, a kind of studio creation. And so one of many from the era.
Yeah.
So there we have it. So that's 50 years ago, March 1971. We've talked about a number of songs, as well as some things that are happening in the wider world. And so, Dave, you have some final words here as we wrap up this edition.
Yeah, well, we'd love to see some more of you. As always, we welcome your likes and your comments.
Right.
Feel free to subscribe. It's worthwhile. We have a lot of content. You can do that right here. You can also watch other years ago episodes up here, and playlist, which is very important. You actually get to listen to the songs and watch performances of these songs that we talked about today. Playlists can be found right here.
And we always include a short reading list of to give you some idea about the people we're talking about. And you can find that here as well. And so once again, thanks for watching. We appreciate everything, and we will see you soon. So thank you. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.